What are we discussing on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast? Are the Dbacks looking to move a starter this offseason?
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas, multimedia journalist, and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, we are discussing, are the D-backs going to move a starter this offseason? Looking at potential Christian Walker and Jock Pederson deals based off predictions. And also want to do a little play review as we've done every day on this podcast. And today we are going to discuss A.J Puk. So a whole bunch I want to discuss with you guys today. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Now let's get into the podcast and let's discuss, are the D-backs looking to move a starter this offseason? Because Mike Hazen has said recently that he's taking calls on his rotation because it's not a surprise. The D-backs currently kind of have too many starters. Now, are all the options great? That's up for debate. I still think the D-backs, you could still make the argument the D-backs have the deepest rotation in Major League Baseball. They're still up there. Yes, it doesn't feel that great, maybe in terms of high upside ceiling, because the back end of the rotation still feels a little shaky, but there's still a world where you go into next season, Gallen's back to being fully healthy, looking like the ace of the D-backs. Merrill Kelly's back to being fully healthy, looking like an underrated ace in Major League Baseball as the number 2 starter. Brandon Pfaadt, year 3, potential breakout year. Your number 4 starter is maybe healthy Erod entering the season, a little bit more in shape, pitching like a number 2 or number 3, but is your number 4. And then Monty, a guy who we've seen be a frontline starter, better shape, pitching a lot closer to the guy that we've seen prior to 2024. And then, of course, Ryan Nelson is the second half of his season. Those last 14 starts where he had like a 3 ERA, a 3.1 FIP. Was that real? Like, there's a world where the D-backs have 6 legitimate starters for next season. But that's the perfect world, right? The realistic world is I expect Gallen to be good, Kelly to be good, Pfaadt potentially good. I think we all feel great about Pfaadt. And then probably one of Erod, Monty, and Nelson being good next season. And so with that being the case, the D-backs probably do have to trade off one of their starting pitchers just because they have so many. The depth is important, though, because as we saw last year, the D-backs really needed that depth. Despite having a deep rotation last year, they actually still didn't have enough starters in their rotation. But as it currently stands, they do have too many. And so other teams are calling Arizona about their rotation. So the question is, who should the D-backs trade in their rotation this offseason if they are going to make a move like that? Because I think you can make an argument pro or con for each guy depending on their own salary, their own value to this D-backs team, their perceived value around the league. Like, there's so many variables for each guy. So let's talk about the case for each guy if they were to be traded from the D-backs this season. We'll start with Zach Gallen, the ace. You would theoretically think Zach Gallen gets you the biggest return of any of the starters because he's the best D-backs starting pitcher. And that might be true. He is the ace of the D-backs, but he's also an expiring contract. And so And not just any expiring contract. He's a Scott Boras client. We know those guys enter the offseason wanting whatever the super max version of an MLB contract is. And so Zach Allen's probably going to want 25 to 30 million dollars, if not more, on his next contract. We'll see if he gets that. Maybe he only gets around 20 million. I don't know, but Zach Allen is a stud. He's the ace of the D-backs, and being on an expiring deal, whoever trades for him is either probably going to have to pay Zach Allen, because why would you trade for him if you're not going to pay him? If you are going to trade for him and then may not pay him after, you're probably not going to give up a large haul then for Zach Allen. So for the D-backs, in theory, Gallen should get you the biggest return, but because he's an expiring contract, teams might not be willing to part with their top prospects. But I still think in theory, he could get you the best return. Merrill Kelly, he is 35 years of age. He is also on an expiring deal. I think Merrill Kelly is one of those guys who mean more to D-backs fans than to the perceived market, because if the D-backs traded Kelly, I can't see the D-backs getting back a great return. If you trade Zach Allen, there's still a world where you get back a top pitching prospect or a top position player prospect, maybe get somebody that could play for you right now. Like, I still think there's a world where a Zach Allen return could help you right now. A Merrill Kelly return, I actually think would. I just don't think you would get the return on investment for Merrill Kelly. I think he's so much better than whatever package you would receive. Yes, he's older. Yes, he only might have a couple of years left, but I would much rather ride with the last couple of years of Merrill Kelly than just trade him for some prospect that's not going to amount to anything, or just some like a solid reliever or a solid position player. Just let me keep Merrill Kelly. Now, Brandon Pfaadt is the only other guy in this rotation that I would make an argument for could get you a better return than a Zach Gallen, because Pfaadt is arbitration controlled for the next few seasons. This is the guy who I think has very high upside. I think when you look at his stuff, it's very good. Like, Pfaadt from year 1 to year 2 has already shown a lot of progress. And I think the way he's tracking right now, he's on track to be a very good, like an elite number 3 starter or a very good number 2 starter in Major League Baseball. But I would probably say if he's like, I would say at his peak, he's probably like an elite number 3 starter in Major League Baseball, potentially like a back end number 2 starter. Like, I think it could be like close to John Lester. And John Lester was like, I guess, a borderline 1. So maybe John Lester's like too ambitious. But I really like Brandon Pfaadt. And because of his age and because of his contract, and he's going to be cheap and he's still an ascending young player, he could get back the D-backs the biggest return, I think. And if the D-backs were to trade him, I would want someone comparable to Pfaadt. I would want a player I could play right now that's of a similar ilk and a similar age, like a 26-year-old, elite back-end reliever for trading Brandon Pfaadt, or someone, I don't know what position, maybe like third base, or if Christian Walker leaves, like a first baseman. I don't know who that guy would be in Major League Baseball, but there's like a 25, 26-year-old guy who is like, he's good, but we're like, next year he's going to be great. That's kind of how we feel about Brandon Pfaadt. I would think about that deal, but the deal I would really think about, if we're trading Brandon Pfaadt, I want to be a part of a package where we're landing a big time star or a big time free agent. If we're trading Zach Gallen, that means the other team is probably giving us like a package for Zach Gallen. But if we're trading Brandon Pfaadt, I want to be with somebody else that we're packaging so we could go get a big fish. I think Brandon Pfaadt is our trade chip if we want to go big fish shopping this offseason. So I'm not trading Brandon Pfaadt for anything. He's got high upside. He's still a super young, cheap player. I love Brandon Pfaadt, and so I would not just give him up for anything. Now we're going to continue this conversation because I didn't realize I was going to be speaking so much on each player. So we'll continue this conversation about the value of each pitcher and whether they should be traded this offseason in segment number 2. But hey, if you want to place a little wager on an upcoming Arizona Cardinals game, maybe, then the best place to do that is going to be FanDuel, because get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Give me the Arizona Cardinals, or you could take the Arizona Cardinals and you could take Kyler Murray over on rushing yards, Kyler Murray over on passing touchdowns, parlayed with the Cardinals money line. If that 3-leg hits, I promise you, you will have a huge smile on your face. So get started with FanDuel. You can get started right now with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss the idea still of the Dbacks trading their starting pitchers, because we said Zach Gallen in theory could get you the biggest return, but because he's an expiring deal, I don't think he will. I think Brandon Pfaadt is actually the best trade chip that the Dbacks have, and I would use him as a package to get a bigger fish if you want to go that route. Merrill Kelly is a guy I would rather keep than trade, because I just don't think you would get a good return on investment when it came to Merrill Kelly. A guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, I think I would be willing to trade him, because as we've talked a bunch on this podcast, I've talked about potential pitchers out there that I would love to add to the back end of the rotation, but you can't really do that with Erods and the Montes in the rotation currently. So you would have to trade one or two of those guys to add another starting pitcher this offseason. And Erod is someone I do like. He was someone I was excited when the D-backs signed him, but first season, a complete disaster. Still owed like $60 million over the last 3 years. So D-backs will probably have to eat at least half of that money if they want to trade him. Don't think you would get back a good return. Like, if you're trading Erod, it is a borderline salary dump. Like, I don't know if a team would be excited of 3 years left on an Erod contract after the first season he just had, knowing he's always hurt. Like, Erod, I think, could be a tough guy to move. I definitely don't think you would get a great return on investment, but if you could find someone to take the remainder of his contract, that might be your best bet. And I might be more willing to trade Erod over Jordan Montgomery because of the length of that contract. At least Monty, final year of his deal. And I think Monty is a better pitcher when he's right than Erod, because I've seen Monty over the last few seasons be healthier than Erod and be a frontline starter for a team that won a World Series. And so I think Monty probably does have more value than Erod because of the 1-year deal. Like, for Zach Gallen, the 1 year hurts his value, but for Jordan Montgomery, I think the 1 year actually helps his value. And I could see a team say, you know what? Let me just roll the dice on Monty, someone who's been very good the prior 3 seasons to 2024, a guy who has had great moments in the postseason, a guy who's been a frontline starter. Like, this is a veteran in Major League Baseball. He's been very good for a very long time. Let me just say, it was a weird, fluky season 2024 where he came into shape unhealthy. So I could see a team rolling the dice on Monty over Eduardo Rodriguez. But the guy in this D-backs rotation that is the most intriguing in terms of how do other teams value him, because there could be a team that says, you know what, based off the numbers last year, we think we have a legit number 2, number 3 starter in the building that you guys don't know about. And so we're going to acquire him like he is that. Or teams could just be like, it was a fluke. Like, yeah, I want him on my team, but only if he's for the cheap. And that's Ryan Nelson, because Ryan Nelson had a tale of 2 halves last year. When you look at his like first 14 starts versus like his last 14 starts, like, it was a tale of 2 halves for Ryan Nelson, because he had a 4.46 ERA through his first 14 starts. And then like his last 14 starts, it was like a 3 ERA. Like, this guy was night and day between the first half of the season and the second half of the season. And he was literally the best D-back starter the whole second half of the season. And so when you look at the numbers of what he did in the second half, they're also like not fluky at all. It's not just the traditional numbers with Ryan Nelson when looking at the second half. In his last 10 starts, 11 games, a 3.23 ERA. You like that? Whip 103, 1.031, 9.4 strikeouts per 9. Like, this guy across the board was good. Like, his FIP during the time was also really good, which tells you it was not fluky. And so I wonder how other teams perceive Ryan Nelson. Do they view him more like the guy in the second half of the season or the guy that we saw in the first half of the year? But now, before we switch up the topic of conversation, because I still want to talk about potential Christian Walker and Jock Pederson deals, but I do want to know in the comment section, who would you guys want to trade from this D-backs rotation? If you had to choose, which direction would you want to go in? Would you want to trade Zach Gallen, see what you get, expiring contract, scared that maybe you can't resign him next year, so you want to trade him now? Maybe a Brandon Pfaadt, who you think you could get the best return from in like a larger package for a big fish? Do you just want to trade Erod or Monty as like a salary dump so you could sign someone else this offseason? Like, let me know if you're even pro the D-backs trading a starting member of the rotation, and if you are, who you think that rotation member should be. But now let's look at Jock Pederson and Christian Walker, because Arizona Sports did a great article basically aggregating all the different websites that have been putting out projections and predictions for contracts for Jock Pederson and Christian Walker. And I want to talk about some of these contracts and if we think they're in the range or out the range for the D-backs. Because on yesterday's podcast, we went through the spot track market value for each player, but these are some predictions from insiders around the league who might know a thing or two. And so let's talk about these projections, because when looking at them, I was like pleasantly surprised. Like, looking at the predictions based off all these insiders, I was like, why can't Christian Walker come back to the D-backs next season? ESPN's Kylie McDaniel thinks 3 years, $57 million for Christian Walker. If he gets under $20 million annually and the D-backs don't re-sign him, that is a catastrophe. Jim Bowden of The Athletic, 3 years, $72 million. That's a little bit more expensive, but like I've said, if it's under a 4-year deal, I don't mind paying up to $25 million for Christian Walker, so I would be fine with that. Keith Law thinks 2 years, 44. Yeah, $22 million a year on a 2-year deal. Sign me up. MLB trade rumors, 3 years, $60 million. Yup, you already know how I feel. Then Fangraphs, Ben Clemens, 3 years, $51 million. Like, you see the trend here. Nobody thinks he's getting more than $3 million, and no one thinks he's going to touch $25 million annually. No one's going over the spot track projected market value for Christian Walker, even though I think he's going to potentially get $25 million. Like, I think someone is going to pay or offer Christian Walker that, but I hope that's not the case. I hope the D-backs are able to bring him back on a 3-year, $72 million or a 3-year, $60 million deal, because if the D-backs can do that, that would be an absolutely perfect home run contract for Arizona. And then looking at Jock Pederson, this one has a little bit more range, because you look at his deal. Actually, the range is not that much. I misread it. I thought it was range because I saw like 14 million to 26 million, but for the people that said 26 million, that's on a 2-year deal, because Kylie McDaniel thinks it's a 1-year, $15 million contract for Jock. Bowden, 2 years, 26. Keith Law, 1 year, 16 million. MLB trade rumors, 2 years, 24. Then Clemens, 1 year, 14. And so everyone thinks he's going to get around 13 to $15 million, like right what he declined for 14. Like, he had the $14 million option, and he might go into this offseason and just sign another $14 million option. Like, again, I just don't believe that unless he just didn't want to be with Arizona, and that's fine. You're allowed to talk to other suitors. Maybe he thinks there's a better opportunity somewhere else. Like, that would be fine, but just to go somewhere else for the same money would feel like a little bit of a punch in the gut. And so for the D-backs, if you need to go to 15, 16, $17 million to bring back Jock Pederson on a 1-year deal, I'm fine. And if he wants like a 2-year deal, $15 million deal, like, I'm also cool with that. He had a great season at DH, fantastic offensive player. I think the D-backs definitely need to bring back Jock Pederson. I would also like if they brought back Randall Grichuk as well. Now I want to discuss A.J Puk and the season he just had for the D-backs in segment number 3. But hey, if you need to do some investing then I suggest using Robinhood Gold, because with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. And also, I want to talk to you guys about this little app I use to save money, or actually get some money back. It's called Ibotta, because big holidays mean big family get-togethers. So gather your loved ones, enjoy all of the holiday traditions you cherish with the help of cash back from Ibotta. That's what I was talking about. This month, Ibotta is giving new users 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Just add the offers in the app to redeem for everything you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers, upload your receipt. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can get everything you need for the holidays. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Download the Ibotta app now and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast starting November 1st. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or Apple App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And let's do ourselves a little A.J Puk review, because Puk is coming off an incredible season with the Arizona Diamondbacks, where he honestly blew away expectations. I mean, we knew he was good with the numbers he put up in Miami, and we saw the eye test and everything, but it really went to another level when he came over to Arizona. When you really dive into the stats, A.J Puk was truly unhittable after the trade deadline, and he was even unhittable before, but he just went to another level post deadline. And that's why we had a whole podcast discussing who should be the Dbacks closer. Should it be Justin Martinez, or should it be A.J Puk? Because A.J Puk is legitimately that dude. He's that nice, and there's a real chance that he could be the Dbacks closer next year. So let's talk about the season he just had with Arizona, because, I mean, if you just want to start simple, you could look at the traditional numbers with A.J Puk, with what he did with Arizona when he came over. A lot of people, a lot of these baseball purists nowadays and the stat nerds are you can't just look at traditional stats. You got to dive deeper into the numbers to know how good a player is. With A.J Puk, you don't have to do that. A 1.32 ERA in 27 innings pitched. He had 43 strikeouts. And, that might sound like a lot. It might not sound like a lot. But when you consider the fact he faced 103 batters, a strikeout rate of over 40% is kind of insane. That's what he just did in Arizona. A 40% K rate is insane. His whip, it wasn't just under a 1 whip. It was a 0.732 whip. That's my New Jersey area code is 732. It was a 0.732 whip, and his strikeouts per 9, 14.2. This was an insane run he had with Arizona once coming over, and that's why it is a real possibility that A.J Puk could be the D-backs closer next year, and it would not be a surprise to anyone. When you look at his numbers as a reliever this past year, he was absolutely dominant, elite in save situations, a 1.77 ERA in save situations, non-save situations, a 1.69 ERA. He was elite as a reliever last year. What messed up his ERA even more is the fact that he had to start games. Total last year, like A.J Puk finished the season with a 3.15 ERA. And that was because the Marlins tried to use him as a starter to begin the year, and that absolutely tanked his ERA. But as a reliever, he was absolutely nasty this past season. And I expect him to be good again next year. Like with the strikeout ability he has, he can throw super hard. He averages around 96 miles per hour on his fastball. He's got an elite slider. Like that fastball slider combination is like kind of unhittable. Like you look at the deep into the numbers for AJ Puk, and this is someone that absolutely just pounds the strike zone. Like his strike percentage is like higher than you would typically expect. Like he throws around 71% of the time it's going to be a strike. His contact percentage allowed 59% in Arizona. Like some of this stuff is kind of unsustainable with what he did with the D-backs last year, but that's why we feel so good about him. That's why we're so excited about him in 2025 because of this run he had last year. But if there was anything to be concerned about with an AJ Puk, I wouldn't say he was bad in like clutch situations, but he looked a little bit more vulnerable because you just check the numbers in like high leverage situations. Again, not bad, but 256 average allowed, 735 OPS allowed. Like it's like the OPS is up a couple hundred points. The batting average is up like 100 points from what he does in like medium and low leverage situations. You look at numbers with runners in scoring position, like 762 OPS, like that's not low. Like I'm not saying that's like bad, but it's not like it's great. Like just something to look at for a guy that we want to be the closer. But again, how much of that, I haven't dived into the numbers of how much of that was when he was just a reliever, because I can tell you most of it was, or excuse me, when he was just a starter, because I could tell you most of it was when he was just a starter. He was pretty nasty and dominant as a reliever this past season. And his sweeper, sinker, maybe those pitches he could be a little bit better at because the slugging allowed was a little high. But again, it's like all when he was a starter. So for AJ Puk, like what do I want from him next year? Can you just repeat what you did in 20? Can you just repeat what you did in 2024? Because if you could do that, you're going to be an elite reliever for the D-backs in 2025. That's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Enjoy your weekend. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.